Welcome back to Tacticians and You, the series about, the Arknights Tacticians. And, this is the penultimate episode. We're going to be talking about the final member of the Tactician class. And, it's Muesli, who also happens to be the catalyst for this video. Because, frankly, I think Mumu is the ultimate Tactician. I don't see how you make a 6-star Tactician that would compete with Mumu. Because Mumu is just, perfect. She is just perfectly the Tactician. I mean, Vigil tried, but, you can just watch his video to see where he landed. But yeah, no, I think Mumu pretty much embodies what Tacticians are. A creative approach to clearing stages. And that's all because of how her clones work. With her clone, Flowing Shape, or as I will be calling it, Blobby, or Blob, she adds another layer to how Tacticians work. Like, while with a normal Tactician, it's just about putting down the Tactician and then they're summoned in a optimal position. With how Mumu Clone works, you have to factor in the surrounding spaces because sometimes, and even high ground tiles, because her clone can become, ranged. I made this argument once about why I think Mumu is better and more fun than Myrtle, and while I think it's stupid now, I think it does embody what makes Mumu stand out. So with Myrtle, it's just about putting down a DP printer that will throw up your next deploy. With Mumu, you get to have the DP printer and your next summon immediately without waiting for the skill activation. It's like, yeah, so Mumu is just so flexible, which is also reflected in her S2 and her S3, that I would recommend. Well, I would pretty much recommend Mumu to everyone as a must-have Vanguard. Muesli is the sort of unit that can either you can draft your team comp around, or just throw in as filler and use her on the fly. Regardless of what you do, Mumu is always there to help you set up a very strong start. Unfortunately, her boundless utility does come with a heavy price tag, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's just talk about her skills. I mean, I could talk about her second talent, but it's Vines Lab specific, and her Module Y does play into that Vines Lab niche. I wouldn't discount it completely, as it makes Mumu's first deploy -2 DP if you deploy her first, and makes subsistent Vines Lab operators deploys -1 DP, but that's kind of niche and not worth worrying about. I also don't want to get into the specifics of Module Y because we don't have it yet, and I don't think it's generally worth it unless you are a Vines Knight player. Her S1, on the other hand, is alright in some cases. It's a very generic skill that just gives both Mumu and her Blob an attack boost and an attack speed boost. Both values starting at 35% with skill level 7, and 3 is pushing it to 50%. It's an okay skill if you aren't planning to run any dedicated range clone targets for your Blob, meaning Mumu's range Blob wouldn't be horribly crippled when you pick fucking Deadeye. Why would you do that anyway? No, so why would you pick a Deadeye or even a Flingers? Yeah. I mean, yes, sure, wider range the clone can cover, but Mumu's range clone trait needs attack speed to summon the other clones, so you kind of have to pair her with high attack speed units like Marksman. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Mumu's Flowing Shape, or Blob, gains a specific trait based on the unit it clones. If it clones a ranged unit, it will periodically spawn a clone in the adjacent 4 tiles next to the main one. If it clones a melee target, it gets to slowly stack stats by stealing it from enemies it hits. Yeah, everyone picks the range clone for a reason. Not to say melee doesn't have a use, because it does. You can get a free block unit that's incredibly useful to have when you need it, but most of the time Mumu is used as a DPS tactician by letting her clone, there's a desirable ranged unit like, let's say, a Trap Master if you are a meta slave. Don't worry, we will talk optimal clone targets later on. Right now, all you need to know is that her S1 is a serviceable skill if you are using it with a slow attack speed clone like Flingers, Deadeyes, or Artillery. You aren't really going to be using it with melee units because S2 is just better on that front. S2 is where we start to see the diversity of Mumu's kit, because S2 and S3 share the same trait of being completely different skills, being, based on what the clone has targeted. S2 is definitely more attuned for melee blob usage though, considering it gives it the ability to recover HP and gain Sanctuary. This makes it an ideal skill to be paired with a defender, preferably either a protector or a juggernaut, since they have the best stat lines, and Blob only cares about stats, not traits. You could probably get away with using it with a guard option like a Lord or a Centurion, since this skill also has the generic attack boost regardless of the clone, but I would heavily recommend just using a Defender. Ranged S2, on the other hand, is an alright skill, but it loses its luster to S3. It just enables the clone to hit 2 different targets at random, keyword being random. I would only see myself using the skill if I was prepared to use melee blob, but I need to swap to range blob midway through the stage. It's kind of laughably bad when you break it down compared to S3. So, yeah, I mean, the DPS potential is good once you pair it with a preferred range target like Trapmaster or even a Marksman, but it just doesn't hold a candle to.
Want me to help brainstorm? Want me to help brainstorm? Learning's flow.
Yeah. So, yeah, just use S2 for melee blob climbing, and take solace in the fact that your ranged option isn't too bad, but S3 will always be just standing there, T-posing on its corpse. S3 is honestly the main reason you should be using Miru, because it is her premier skill, although I would argue you should M9 her anyway. It's just her S3 will always be the skill you will use the most, since her best clone options are ranged, and S3 is the best skill for range blob. I mean, aside from the generic attack boost, range S3 will immediately spawn all deployable clones it can, and then let them bind on attack for the duration of the skill, while also healing the main blob. Effectively, at the press of the skill button, your single blob becomes an artillery battery of CC, which with a high enough attack speed will permabind targets for the duration. Meanwhile, melee blob gets to suck enemies into it with a pull force of 0. Not saying it's bad, but it's like, just use Mint at that point if you specifically want a Vortex Explorer. Like, melee blob gets nothing apart from that. And maybe our micro stun, but yeah. And the generic attack boost, which both versions of the blob get, which makes this pretty much a ranged blob only skill. It's just, Muru's kit is so good, and melee S3 is like a shit stain on a magnum opus. It really offers nothing, especially since its pull force is 0, according to the wiki, which is, well, only good for basic chaff. And it doesn't have enough range on that pull force to justify it, using it as a pseudo mint. That said, I have found some uses for it, which we'll get to later. But yeah, no, I think it's generally not a worthwhile skill, which is a shame. But range S3 is so good that if you're using her, if you're using her optional targets with it, because, obscenely high damage potential and a persuader heal, but oh god, her optional targets are just a whole other can of worms. So, one of the biggest price tags that come with Mumu is actually tied to her module and the targets, specifically her module X. Unlike the other tacticians, reaching optimal stat lines for the blob is a huge fucking ask. It's not as simple as maxing out her level. In fact, you could just leave her at level 60. But for the clones, you better be ready to start max leveling some 6 stars. And if you want your blob to be at its best, you gotta show up for the max level module 3, X, that is, specifically X. Without the module at E2, it is only copying 90% of the clone stats, which is negligible, it's only 10% you're missing, but you will want at least the level 2 module so the blob can clone immediately without the 5-second wait to activate its skill. But at that point, just get level 3. If you're bringing her to advanced content, you really want that level 3 module for the 100% copy stats. Because at that level of content, you should probably be min-maxing. And in fact, I'm just going to put this out here. Everything else I'm going to say for this video is just going to be min-maxing. You don't really need to do this. Level 60 is fine. But I feel like just for the sake of this argument I'm trying to make, I'm just going to say I'm going to be just min-maxing. It also makes my job easier because the wiki only puts out max stats, not the level 60 stats. So that's why. Anyway, so alright, we got the level 3 Mumu module. What's the next price tag? Well, I say you will need at least one E2 level 96 star, preferably with module. And if we're being meta slaves about this, it will specifically need to be either Ella or Dorothy, since Trapmasters have the best stat lines for range blobbed, with marksman like attack speeds and extremely high attack ratios. Of course, if you don't own either of them, Robin is a good enough substitute and is a welfare. Using Robin, you're only losing about 108 attack for I calculate in their modules. But let's ignore that, because I personally hate the idea that Trapmasters are the only good ranged option for Mumu. Because not everyone likes the Trapmaster archetype. I mean, I do, but not everyone else likes how they play. When it comes to Mumu's potential clone targets, I believe it's more important to have an operator you will deploy before we consider the next important stats like attack intervals, then DPS. So let's say you don't like Trapmasters, but you still kind of want the best of the best. What are your options? Well, okay, I mean, before we get into the options, I do generally feel bad for dismissing Mumu's Module Y so casually, and since we did just bring up Dorothy, who I would personally recommend as your Trapmaster clone target, because of the other option is a collab there, and she is going to be my stat line going into this rest of these comparisons for at least the ranged targets. Sure, let's talk about Mod Y and just give it a full look at, although it is going to be speculation as, well, I don't have a CN account, and I'm not putting this series on hold until its global release. I'm just going to say off straight off the bat though, you kind of need this module at level 3 for its most worthwhile use, and I can only see it being worthwhile in Vine Snipes only. I don't think it's worth it outside of that niche if you're planning to use it in the like in a shell. Like if you're using it in the shell, you might as well just be using Mod X, because there are just better melee targets at that point. So, with all that said, what is Mod Y bringing to the table? First, it further increases the DP reduction for Vines Knights to 2 instead of 1, which means your first Vines Knight operator gets minus 3 DP. And seeing this module incentivizes Mumu being being deployed first, this makes it a budget pioneer Mod Y, which is exceptional. One of the Pioneer's strongest strengths is their Mod Y, making them a really cheap block 2s who can hit the floor fast and start doing their job. Yes, Pioneers get minus 4 from their modules, but minus 3 is huge, and we are getting a 2 DP discount, which is massive. When you remember your cast options for Vines Knight are Asajine and Ifrit. Yes, I am discounting Magellan, Maya, and Silence Alter here. I wouldn't really call them casters or viable arts DPSs either. I mean, sure, if you want to be flexible, you could pretend Hull and Astia can be Vines Knights, but they don't count for modules, so who cares? I mean, I do. I have a M9 Hull, but that's irrelevant. Anyway, the DP discount isn't even the biggest thing I want to talk about. It's how it affects her cloning. Basically, if she clones a Vines operator, Mumu will get 10 SP. But then if you deploy the clone operator, they will also gain 10 SP. And this is why I say you need to get this mod at Mod 3. At Mod 2, you only gain the discount, and the Mumu gains 8 SP. There's no extra benefit for the deployed clone operator. I will say this though, this is really fucking cool. Basically, letting her shorten the cooldown of her skills by like a worthwhile 10 seconds is massive on a DP generator. Just gonna say that. But I like how thematic is as well, because it plays into the Vines Lab identity of faster than normal SP generation. It continues the trend seen in Saya with her second talent, Apple T Source's talent, and Ifrit's second talent, and I love that this is the faction's identity. And it's just really neat seeing that being continued with Mumu. Also, this is further speculation, but I think this pairs well with Dorothy's new second module. For those who haven't seen it, I'll just sum it up as, well, it lets Dorothy flip a coin to see if she deploys a free trap in her range when she's placing her resonators. Considering SP for Trap Masters is how to restore traps, and the new trait for this module reduces the cost of traps, I feel like if we all mix that together, Dorothy is going to be able to spam a lot of resonators very fast, especially with some good luck. Basically, what I'm saying is, I think we're going to see some very interesting 2-op clears once Mumu and Dorothy's second modules hit global. And honestly, that has me salivating. And I'm honestly can't wait to do that, but I do need to own Dorothy to do that. All that positively said, though, I still stand by what I said. I think it has no value outside of Einstein. It's like Science Alter's second module. It's great for fans of the archetype and the niche it caters to, but normal players are just, well, better served by either the other module, in the case of Mumu, or just more conventional picks in the case of Adjures. Moving on now to the rest of this section though. Alright, back on track. I'm just going to start with my personal favorite here, which is loop shooters. With a loop shooter like Noan Tia, who I'm going to be using to compare to Dorothy, we get the much bigger health pool with Noan's 2.5k compared to 1.5k from Dorothy, while also having the larger attack stat to work with at 765, while Dorothy has 661. The only difference is the attack intervals, which is attack speed, as Trapmasters have 0.85 seconds between attacks, while loop shooters are at 1 second, which probably does affect the DPS. But using SV Mumu, the attack speed is still more than enough to permabind targets. For the sake of mentioning it, Dolphy's DPS is 777 per second, while Nuantu is still stuck at 665 per second, so oof. Honestly though, look, as long as it's permabinding, I think that's worthwhile. Okay? And honestly, I think the biggest reason to use a loop shooter over a Trapmaster is the range, because it does allow the clone to hit behind, which can be a game changer in some niche situations, or if you're like me, is the reason why you cannot stop using a loop shooter, because you just become way too reliant on the ability to hit back behind you. Like, decal binders and ritualists can also enable this, but one less range in the front, the stats are worse, and if you're using a ritualist, your realistic target is Valakuen, because artillery is limited, and I don't want to presume people have her. Also, both of them have terror attack stats, with decal bounders at 1.9, and ritualists are only slightly better at 1.6. So yeah, use a loop shooter. If you don't have Naruto, don't worry, because Caper is a red cert loop shooter at 150 red certs. Caper is weaker than Naran, losing at about 300 HP, and her attack is capped at 665, which still gives her an edge over Dorothy, I guess. But, you know, once again, the attack speed difference does make Dorothy strong in this situation. Still, I would recommend Caper over Dorothy because of the 4-star investment cost compared to a 6-star investment. And she's basically a welfare. Hell, if you even don't want to use the red certs on her, Bridge is coming with Eblana's banner, who's a loop shooter welfare. 5-star, sure, but I think all the loop shooters are pretty fucking good. And yeah, there you go. Anyway, once we get the inevitable loop shooter modules as well, because I don't think they're going to end up like Arts Defenders, I can see both Naran and Caper becoming the most desirable targets over Trapmasters. But let's say you don't like either loot shooters as well. Well, marksmans are fine as well. Their attack is comparable to a Trapmaster, but their slightly longer attack intervals is what holds them back. For 6 stars, Azuja is better because of her attack is slightly higher, but Achada is a fine alternative. If you're choosing a 5-star, I am picking Cruz Ultra because she is a welfare. And while Blue Poison and April have high attack stats, I'm not going to presume you owe them. But if you do, they're fine alternatives. For 4 stars, just use Vermil because she has the highest, followed by Jessica. Also, I just want to briefly bring up Flingers versus Deadeyes, since both have the same range, and there are cases where you might want that range in junction with S1 to negate their terrible attack speeds. I mean, I wouldn't say it negates it, but I'm just going to say it now, use a Deadeye. Yeah, their attack interval is higher, but the stats of a Deadeye is better than a Flinger any day of the week. Just remember, using a Deadeye with S1 should be your last resort. It is genuinely bad. Don't do that to yourself. Okay, melee block clones aren't as debated since everyone just uses S3 range skill, but in situations where you are using an S2 melee blocker, defenders just work if you want to block for a unit. Like, let me put it like this. You want to block for a unit, and while Centurions do exist, I wouldn't recommend them. Gravel Ultra and Blaze do have higher stats, but they are more squishy when you probably don't want it. And if you are using a melee block, I'm just going to say it now, use a protector that has Block 4 module. Fuck stats. Block 4 is so worth it, and you can get it on a Hoshiguma, which is great. Honestly, just do that. If you don't have a Hoshi, 9 works, but that's also unlikely, so I will just recommend Matterhorn because he's a 4-star with Block 4 module. and he's a pretty good unit by himself with the niche of being a really good arts damage tanker. Apart from that, for the other classes, come on. I generally wouldn't recommend using Guardians, Prime Protectors, or Arts Defenders as they have low defensive stats. Sentries are fine if you want the extra bit of range, and Juggernauts are fine if you're planning to use a Juggernaut as your solo lane holder already, so they can just pull double duty. Out of the two 6-star Juggernauts though, Pants is slightly stronger here, but Modok is fine. Vulcan Leonardo works as well if you are desperate, but generally I would just recommend using a Protector with Block 4 module. Also, if you are dead set on using a guard for some reason, Lord or Centurion will work. I am not going into the specifics because, well, they pale in comparison to defenders, but there are options if you hate defenders for some reason. Also, before I end this, ambushes are an option if you want to use S3 melee skill. If for some reason you want to use melee S3, and God bless your soul if you do, ambushes work because block 0 just basically means enemies will walk through them and just turn the blob into a mini vortex without the threat of it dying to melee enemies. It's stupid, and it will achieve the same result you would get with Midden, since all it does is effectively cage chaff enemies, but it's a tech. So I have to mention it, just like how I have to mention that melee blob, Moo Blob copying a Abyssal Hunter lets the blob benefit from both Spectre Alter and Scardy's talents. I don't have footage of that because fuck Abyssal Hunters, I hate them, but it's something as well. Also, I want to note the blob does take on the damage type of the target. So if you want your blob to do arts damage, pick a Mecha Cord. You wouldn't be using an arts fighter as your melee target. So yeah, I mean that just leaves us with casters, as we kind of have a rolled out Rich List and decal binders, and since attack intervals are the second most important factor, you're going to end up with Mecha Cords with their 1.3 attack intervals compared to class standard 1.6. That said, once Shapers get their modules, Techno is a fine option with mod 1, purely because of the range, if you need it, and you can replace Techno with Eblana when she gets her second mod for the stats. I'm only mentioning this since I would consider a niche Moo use case like everything else I have mentioned in this specific situation, like section here. So yeah, just cleaning up house. And I can't wait for someone to tell me I still somehow managed to miss a Moo tech. Okay, my phone's getting kind of parched, and this has been a lot of words. But let's try to summarize what I've said so far. Moo is a good tactician, but using her to her proper potential is very expensive. Very expensive because you're going to at least need a level 60 Moo with full module, at least M6, because I would still say you should still get the S2 M3 for just the situations where you're going to be using a melee blob, and then you need at least 2 other 6-stars at max level with modules preferably. But if you do pay that price, Moo is easily one of the best units in the game in terms of what she can offer, and just like over literally anything else. Like S3 enables high DPS potential, while S2 gives you a very tanky, cheap deployment option, while also giving you a way to generate DP. And this is that whole thing with mod Y, which is just going to be excellent for you Vines Knight players. Moo is worth the price of entry to use, even if you don't want to do everything I said and just min-max for the sake of min-max. But I do need to point out the one thing that stops me from saying she is the one you should build. She is a limited unit. If you didn't get her on her initial banner, you are fucked, since limited units don't get reruns really. And if she does get a raid up as part of another limited units banner, it's like 3% chance of getting her. So either you have to get lucky or pay 300 spark to get her. That is a huge fucking ass on top of all the other requirements to make her the amazing unit she is. And I would know. I paid that tax last year with Wizardo banner. I did the 300 spark for her, and that's why for pot 6 logos I refused to build. I love my Moo dearly, but I only sparred for her because at that point I was indoctrinated by Black Knight and Beanstalk, so I could justify it. Moo is very much a tactician for enthusiasts, like Midden is. The key difference being that Midden is for people who want a tactician, who also don't mind using it over better alternatives, while Moo is for people who don't mind the obscene investment costs, both pool income and resource-wise. Anyway, I think with this all said, I am now just prepared to, well, end the series and answer the question I did, well, propose at the start of the season, episode 1. So tune in for next week, where we talk about the conclusion.